So, hello, fellow Earthlings. This is Earthling 6455463728. And Joyce Myers and the grew up in the same household myth. I heard Joyce Myers this morning talking about that, and her brother actually, and I wanted to talk about that. But, as usual, I am Earthling, yada yada yada. I am an ex-Army reservist. I have a couple of degrees that I got with the help of a scholarship from a long time ago. I have traveled to a number of places like Caracas, Venezuela, the Grand Canyon, Czech Republic, Tokyo, Japan, and I take care of my uncle who has dementia. So that's it for me. So this morning, I, by the way, am not at all religious. I'm in fact an atheist, so I don't believe in any God at all, just to be clear. But for a really long time, I kind of still held on to those principles. Not so much anymore. But anyway, my uncle was listening to Joyce Myers in the other room, and I happened to hear Joyce talking about her brother who became addicted to drugs, maybe from the age of 17 even, when he enlisted in the military. She gave a story about how the sergeant might have introduced him to drugs, maybe not, I don't know, as a way for him to deal with war or something like that. Basically, her brother was addicted for his entire life. And she was noting the fact that, here it was that she and her brother, they'd grown up in the same household. And unfortunately, her brother had taken his life a couple of years before, as after a lifetime of being addicted to drugs. And here she was at 75 years old, still preaching the word of God every day, or whatever it is she does. And she didn't want to say that she was better than him or anything like that, but she was in fact noting that she wanted to believe that both of them had the same, they lived in the same household, they grew up in the same household, and she wanted to believe that they had the same opportunities in life, and yet look at the different outcome. And she was basically saying that even though she wasn't comparing the two of them, she says that she's not comparing the two of them. She's comparing the two of them. It's that dodge that people do where I'm not saying this, but let me just go ahead and say it, even though I'm saying that I'm not saying it. And part of what she was saying again was that she wanted to believe that the two of them had the same opportunities. Otherwise, how unfair would it be that God let this thing, this unfortunate sequence of circumstances happen to her brother. Of course, she went on to say that he always blamed other people for his problems, and if there was someone there to tell him what to do, then he would do it. But if failing that, he just wasn't doing it. So if she said, get up and go to work, he'd get up and go to work. If she said, clean this up, he'd clean it up. But, and he lived at, was it the family house or maybe her house, for decades, as I guess they were trying to support him. He had a kid, he didn't pay child support. He, and this really doesn't seem good at all, he would make sure to get paid in cash so that the government could not deduct money from his checks in order to avoid paying child support, which really isn't cool at all. But I've talked about this before, this whole thing where people are like, grew up in the same household and look how different they are. Um, and my attitude with respect to that has been that no, you grew up in the same household, so of course you're going to be different. If your parents, as they inevitably will, are closer or relate more to one of the kids, of course they're going to relate less to the other kid and probably give them less attention and probably think that they're not going to amount to as much. So, yeah, of course that might be the case. If it is that you share an interest with what your child does, if you messed up on the first child, you don't know what you're doing, and as a result of that, you redouble your efforts on the second child, yeah, that's how that can go. Or maybe you focus all your attention on the first child and things are coming along nicely, and as a result of that, you did not put as much effort into the second child. Of course, it's going to be completely different with the second child. I don't know where people get this idea. Well, I don't know where we get this idea that people are going to be so similar because they grew up in the same household. Simply because, as I mentioned, there are two sides to everything. If you focus on your first kid, you may never get around to focusing on the other one. If you messed up with the first one, you might double your efforts, redouble your efforts for the second one. Kids are not going to have the same friends. You might move from one area to the other when the kids are growing up. If you don't know, like what you're doing, and I don't know, a step parent comes into the fold, that can completely change how this kid does. They might have the same one parent and another parent's different. There are so many different parameters that come into play, like the sex of the child. I mean, if you're a daughter, I remember my sister's boss. The daughter could stay at home forever if she needed to, and never ever get married or anything necessarily, but the son better be out there working. That is not the same conditions that people are going to be raised in. And to get back to Joyce specifically, I remember that Joyce has spoken about herself and her life and her attitude before she was a preacher. I am kind of fuzzy on the details of it, but it didn't seem like she was destined to become this, well-known preacher. It really didn't. So I don't know if, Joyce has this idea. Well, she's certainly suggesting that, hey, here I am, 75, preaching the word of God and doing this and doing that. That was never apparent that that's where she would end up based on, what she talked about, the type of person that she was before she got into preaching, and all of the near misses that she had with the person that she is today and the changes in her attitude. So she's giving this story where, look at the two of us, look how widely different we ended up. And number one, what is this household thing? Because clearly, number one, her brother was in the household until he was 17, and then he went to the military. He didn't go to some prestigious internship somewhere. He didn't go to university. I mean, I don't remember exactly what her education level is, but if you have a life where you are, in similar circumstances with your siblings, and then, many multiples of time beyond that have passed, and then you look and see where they end up, why is it that the trajectory that you might have been presumed to follow in those first 2 decades of your life, why do we assume that you wouldn't be completely on a completely different path from that, like twice as much time passed as you started off? Like, let's say it's 40 years that her brother spent being the type of person that he was. Why wouldn't he be in a completely different place than where you thought that he might end up? That's exactly how life works out. And, for herself, for Joyce, she's like, I have to believe that we had the same opportunities. Well, he was in the military. I don't know where you ended up. But those are not the same opportunities. What do you mean, up to high school? I don't think that he even finished high school necessarily at 17. I might be wrong. But I don't know. So she has to believe that, otherwise it would be tremendously unfair. How unfair would it be of, the way that God let things turn out? I suppose she might have been intending. But I imagine that Joyce speaks off of the cuff a lot of the times. And this particular time that she was talking, I was just really saddened, is just the simplest way to put it, that is her take on the situation. And that's the take that she's preaching to other people. Because she was essentially saying at the end that God basically, helps those who help themselves. God basically, the people who say yes to him are the people who succeed along the path that he intended for them. So, I don't know, it was just a sad one this morning. And I want to remind everybody out there that don't compare yourself poorly or badly when you're comparing yourself, let's say, to your siblings. Just do not. Because for me personally, in many ways it was a good thing, but my mother has a million times more time and interest spent with my mother, with my sister. And I can't put all of that on my mother, because I was a kid who just liked to read, and I did not need my mother's attention when I was reading. So, she got us into the library. I don't think my sister was ever really that much into reading. So my sister was really more along the talk and communicate with my mother. And her beliefs and everything else line up with that. And then how can you even compare my sister and I, when my interest is read as much as I can, and my sister's interest is, where's my mom? I need to spend time with my mom, interacting with my mom. As a really young kid, she would get up, my mom wasn't there, she would cry. That kind of thing. And I was never in that position. I don't know how it ended up like that, but that's how it did. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, share, dislike, any of those good things. And you can perhaps want to keep the feedback in a manner that you would like if this were your YouTube content. Have a good one. Peace.